You're listening to Rootbound, a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside.
Do you need to get rid of your carbon dioxide? Try the Calvin cycle. Carbon fixation for the rest of us.
Thank you for listening to Rootbound. My name is Steve, and for today I have a little bit of foreshadowing for you because I want to talk about a botanical term that I did not know the definition to until after this episode when I had to go look it up. Because as you will see, both the guest and I chose a plant that was defined by this word, and that word is droop. What is a droop, you might ask? Well, a droop is a classification of fruit. So there's many different classifications of fruits. Droop is one of them. Berry is also one of them. There are others, but let's talk about a droop. What is a droop? Do you know? I didn't. A droop is, in its simplest, essentially a stone fruit, something that has a hard seed in the middle surrounded by softer flesh. And examples of droops are peaches, plums, olives. There's many droops. One thing that happened when I was researching this is like avocados, those are also droops. But apparently an avocado is not a droop, and that has to do with the consistency of the seed in the center. That seed doesn't have a hard outer shell with a softer middle. The seed is a consistent consistency throughout the seed, which apparently that makes it not a droop. And apparently an avocado is technically a berry. So there you go. So that's a droop. Moving on to the guest segment of the show, and I just want to give a little bit more foreshadowing that this next segment has just about everything. It has the universe, it has philosophy, it has feces. You'll see what I mean. Let's get to the guest. So my guest on today's episode of Rootbound is my sister Harmony. Hi, Harmony.
Hi.
So do you have a plant you want to share with me?
I do.
What is it?
I have quite a wild ride prepared, by the way, because when I research
great.
stuff, I tend to go down kind of a rabbit hole asking, why does this matter at all?
That is exactly what we're interested in here.
Oh, great. Well, hold on to your butts.
All right, here we go.
So I've chosen a plant that at first might appear boring or kind of obvious, but because it is of such great cultural significance, we might take its interesting characteristics for granted. So it's a very popular flower, and many popular fruits are related to it. And a chemical responsible for the characteristic smell of one of the fruits in this family, not the fruit of this particular flower I'm talking about, a chemical responsible for the characteristic smell of one of the fruits in this family is also present in the galactic center.
Oh, how do we know that?
I did a pause so you could add an echo or something if you want.
Okay. No, good. I'll do it. Yeah. Mike, can I guess?
Yeah.
Is it the Prunus genus?
No.
Okay, dang. Okay, then I won't guess anymore.
Okay. This is from the Wikipedia entry in the Galactic Center. It says in 2009, astronomers were able to identify a chemical called ethyl formate in a big dust cloud at the center of the Milky Way. Ethyl formate happens to be responsible for the flavor of raspberries, which is related to roses, genus Rosa. Rose is the flower that I chose.
So the Galactic Center smells of roses?
Smells of raspberries, and raspberries are related to roses.
Oh, I see, yes.
So, let's see. Apples, peaches, almonds are in the same family. Loquats, a whole bunch of stuff related to the rose in the same family. Also, if you look at a rose in nature, like a wild rose, you'll see that it resembles an apple blossom.
Mm-hmm. I think are pears in that same family as well?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I tried to make this not I read Wikipedia to you, but I just have a couple blips from the rose Wikipedia page. Most species are native to Asia, with smaller numbers native to Europe, North America, northwestern Africa. Different species hybridize easily. So the rose plant is a medium, I guess. A great medium, kind of like citrus, is you can like Frankenstein it into stuff and make a new thing. Plants that are related, I have a drupe or prune is related. So you're actually right. In a way.
Wait, what? Oh, a drupe? No, am I right? What did I say?
Didn't you say prune? Drupe?
Oh, I said genus Prunus, which I don't think prunes are in the genus Prunus, because a prune is a dried plum, which is a drupe. I'm actually not quite sure what a drupe is. That's something actually the plant I'm going to tell you about later is also a drupe. So we're in drupe land. If the rose hips are also drupes.
Well, a raspberry is considered an aggregate of tiny drupelets.
Oh, I'm going to start referring to my cats as that. I have 3 cats, and they're an aggregate of tiny drupelets.
Ahoy, drupelets.
They just made a sound. I don't know if you could hear that. The drupelets are active. Yeah.
The call of the druplet.
Indeed.
Members of this family include apricots, plums, pears, apples, strawberries, raspberries, and roses. Roses are insect-pollinated in nature. Most roses are deciduous, but a few, particularly from Southeast Asia, are evergreen, are nearly so. Rose hips are the fruit of the wild rose. Many of the domestic cultivars do not produce hips. That's why rose hips sounds kind of old-timey or not foreign, but like not as familiar to us in our culture, because the roses that they cultivate for you to buy at the store or whatever do not produce rose hips. The rose hips are the fruit that appears after the flower goes away. And they're said to contain more vitamin C, calcium, phosphorus, and iron than oranges. And I found from 2 sources that during World War II in England, rose hips were gathered for their abundance of these vitamins and minerals, and that they make an excellent survival food.
That's very interesting. I knew that rose hips were a thing, but you never really thought about rose hips when you think of a rose bush. I did see a bunch of rose hips when I was in Alaska, and apparently it was just before rose hip season, but the people in Alaska gather like the wild rose hips as one of the berries that they gather.
Oh.
Yeah, Mjohan agrees.
And it's interesting because it does look like hips. Like, they call it that.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like little hips on the plant.
That's true. I think that we have 2, it looks like 2 different cultivars of roses in our garden, and I think one of them does have hips. I was gone for like the prime time last summer, but I need to inspect that more.
The roots have been used as an ointment for sore eyes, and the wood of the plant for arrows. Rose otto is the real form of rose oil, and everything else is...
How did you spell that? Otto?
O-T-T-O. I forgot to dig into the etymology of that word.
Like the bus driver from The Simpsons?
Yeah.
Cool. So that's the real form of what now?
The rose essential oil. If it's called rose otto, then it is a real oil. And on the online etymology dictionary, the root meaning of otto is a German given name and surname meaning wealth and prosperity. So it takes, something like 60 roses to make 1 drop of rose otto, rose essential oil. All other rose oils that you encounter, if it does not say rose otto, then it is an absolute, which you probably know more about what an absolute is than I do, but it's like an extract. Okay, so the thorns on a rose stem, they're not really thorns, they're prickles. So a thorn is a sharp, pointed, modified stem, this is from Wikipedia, and a prickle is a sharp outgrowth from the epidermis, or bark. So thorns on a rose aren't thorns, botanically speaking, they are prickles.
Oh, that's also something I'm going to call my cats. Prickles.
Good morning, prickles. So it's interesting that such a precious, such a complex, scented, intoxicating being, plant being, also demands by its own being that it be handled with care. I thought that was interesting. Or also like something really wonderful is also a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, that's true. It is interesting that we are so attracted to roses as a species that we don't mind that it has thorns. There's lots of other flowers that don't have prickles. Sorry, prickles, not thorns. But the rose we have continued to cultivate, even though it can hurt you.
Yes. And so a molecule that is a part of the characteristic bouquet of roses, indole, is also a molecule that is present in human feces.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That reminds me of the song "Roses" by Outkast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. They're inextricably linked, even in a way that you couldn't even fathom. So that's interesting too. This is the, it seems kind of obvious and boring, like, oh, the rose, but like, why? What are the things about it? It has a complexity and a beauty, and its characteristic smell also shares a profile with poop, and it has thorns and it's dangerous. So there's this like kind of down and dirty, down in it, like you can get hurt. You're smelling poop.
It's very the dichotomy is more than I thought. I mean, the every rose has its thorn. That's a pretty obvious dichotomy. But the every rose also smells like poop was not something I expected to learn today.
But something I was interested in was the function of the rose within pre-Anthropocene wilderness. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but like,
yep.
So we have extracted this plant from its contexts. And it carries all this cultural significance because we've extracted it from its original context and placed it within our own human context, wherein, like, in regards to like civilization, we sort of extract ourselves from nature, or like this civilization considers itself separate from nature. So I was curious to know, what is the rose as a character in all of nature? Like, everything sort of develops, everything in nature evolves its characteristics as a part of this grand symphony. And I didn't really find that out, but I got to some interesting other places. Just thinking about, it sort of spurred this little, not so much a tangent, but just sort of a bigger conversation, which I'll sort of blow through really quickly. And I promise I'll bring it home in a relevant way.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it.
I wanted to know who is the rose as a character within this grand symphony of beings that we are experiencing through the unfolding of time. And I kind of got to the place where, for now, I'm satisfied with, I had trouble finding out like who the rose is in the context of its like native habitat. But I thought that was interesting in regards to like the whole thing, all of nature as a personality, what Terence McKenna referred to as the vegetable mind. This quote about indole: perfume manufacturers sometimes add synthetic indole to commercial perfumes, attempting to replicate nature's symphony, but such attempts invariably fall short. And then my thoughts just on civilization is, we currently more readily attribute consciousness to complex networks of our own creation, like AI, than to the complex biological network that is the entire planet itself. So we more readily ascribe personality and consciousness to things of our own creation rather than like the entire, like, we are like a combination of complex systems, and we're a being with awareness. So what other like combinations of complex systems could equal beings with awareness? We don't know, but this is like the the road I went down, researching the rose.
I mean, that's very, very interesting. One of the things that I'm trying to learn in this podcast is learn more about plants, and I think it's more and more obvious that plants do have some kind of consciousness. It's completely different from our world. I was talking in the first episode with my friend Ashley, who's the host of The Watering Hole, this podcast about animals, and animals can be really weird. And I said this in the first episode, but when it comes down to it, from a beetle to a elephant, they're pretty similar to us, right? They eat, they sleep, they poop in all the kinds of similar ways that the animal kingdom does. But plants are kind of this whole different thing, and it's really hard, I think, for humans to really wrap our head around how they operate. And so that's one of the things I'm hoping to do in this podcast is try to understand a bit more, not only like the science of it, but really the how and the why. So that's interesting. You kind of brought that whole thing up.
Yeah, I'm pleased that I'm excited that you're on a similar track with this. Because I thought, like, the fact that we are at a point in civilization where we try to machine replicate things that are really wonderful and they always fall short, and we just ignore that as sort of a disregard for the complex network in which we live, disregarding the complex network as possibly a personality, to a reduction to the sum of its parts, is a reason we're annihilating the planet.
Yeah.
And so
true.
I have a great, amazing quote by Richard Tarnas. I'm going to read it in its entirety, and then I will add a sprinkling, and that will be the end of my presentation.
Okay.
A progressive impoverishment of human life and the human spirit, a fragmentation of original unities, a ruinous destruction of the sacred community of being. Since the encompassing cosmological context in which all human activity takes place has eliminated any enduring ground of transcendent values, spiritual, moral, aesthetic, the resulting vacuum has empowered the reductive values of the market and the mass media to colonize the collective human imagination and drain it of all depth. The drive to achieve ever greater financial profit, political power, and technological prowess becomes the dominant impulse moving individuals and societies, until these values, despite ritual claims to the contrary, supersede all other aspirations. The disenchanted cosmos impoverishes the collective psyche in the most global way, vitiating its spiritual and moral imagination. Vitiate, I might be pronouncing that wrong, not only in the sense of diminish and impair, but also in the sense of deform and debase. In such a context, everything can be appropriated. Nothing is immune. Majestic vistas of nature, great works of art, revered music, eloquent language, the beauty of the human body, distant lands and cultures, extraordinary moments in history, the arousal of deep human emotion, all become advertising tools to manipulate consumer response. For quite literally, in a disenchanted cosmos, nothing is sacred. The soul of the world has been extinguished. Ancient trees and forests can then be seen as nothing but potential lumber. Mountains nothing but mineral deposits. Seashores and deserts are oil reserves. Lakes and rivers engineering tools. Animals are perceived as harvestable commodities, indigenous tribes as obstructing relics of an outmoded past, children's minds as marketing targets. At the all-important cosmological level, the spiritual dimension of the empirical universe has been entirely negated, and with it, any publicly affirmable encompassing ground for moral wisdom and restraint. The short term and bottom line rule all. Whether in politics, business, or the media, the lowest common denominator increasingly governs discourse and prescribes the values of the whole. Myopically obsessed with narrow goals and narrow identities, the powerful blind themselves to the larger suffering and crisis of the global community. In a world where the subject is experienced as living in and above and against a world of objects, other peoples and cultures are more readily perceived as simply other objects, inferior in value to oneself, to ignore or exploit for one's own purposes. as are other forms of life, biosystems, planetary, and the planetary whole. Moreover, the underlying anxiety and disorientation that pervade modern societies in the face of a meaningless cosmos create both a collective psychic numbness and a desperate spiritual hunger, leading to an addictive, insatiable craving for ever more material goods to fill the inner emptiness and producing a manic techno-consumerism that cannibalizes the planet. The ambition to emancipate ourselves as autonomous subjects by objectifying the world has, in a sense, come full circle, returned to haunt us by turning the human itself into an object as well, an ephemeral side effect of the random universe, an isolated atom in a mass society, a statistic, a commodity, passive prey to the demands of the market, prisoner of the self-constructed modern iron cage. That's the quote from Richard Tarnas. Just a couple little, tiny little bits. A side note, when I was researching indole, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing right, it is a molecule found in human feces, also found in the scent profile of rose. There's another molecule called scatol, or skatol, I don't know how you say it. And that molecule is present in jasmine, orange blossom, and lily, and also poop. And in a couple of sources, one including Molecules That Amaze Us by Paul May, but I found it a couple other places too. Skatol is added artificially to ice cream flavoring.
Wow.
So I'll just end with this Rumi poem. I ask the rose, where did you get such skin? She laughs. How could she answer? She is drunk, but not enough to say secrets. And that's it.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing about the rose and the universe. It was very, very educational. And there was a lot bigger takeaways in there for sure, but the roses really smelling like poo, poo, poo. It really, that was, very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, I know you like to thank you. Shit don't stink, but lean a little bit closer. See, roses really smell like boo, boo, boo.
Do you mind if I tell you about a plant?
Please. I was hoping that you would.
Very good. So this plant, this is the first tree I'm talking about on this podcast. Even though I have not actually seen the tree, but I have seen the fruit. And this story also has a tinge of regret in it as well.
And can I just stop you for a moment? Sure. Sentence, I have not seen the tree, but I have seen the fruit. This story is also something with a tinge of regret.
Yeah.
That sounds like the beginning of an autobiography.
Maybe I'll make it that. And also the tinge of regret, but as I thought about it more today and looked at some stuff a little deeper, there is also some of the same themes that you talked about as far as the way humans are changing our planet. So we're on the same theme today, and it's also a drupe. The fruit. So the name of the tree and the fruit is Umarí, and that's spelled Umari. And the Latin name, I'm just pulling up now because it's long and like Latin names are. And this is one of those places where I didn't actually click on my notes soon enough because I was listening the whole time. So, yeah, the fruit is called Umarí, and the Latin name is Poracaiba sericea. And this is a tree that is native to the Amazon, and it's in Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, and Brazil. And it's a tree that grows, from what I've read, I have not seen the tree, about 20 meters, but sometimes it's lower. But how I kind of learned about this fruit was a number of years ago. I was in Peru for work. I was there to document illegal deforestation in the Peruvian Amazon, and I was in Iquitos, Peru, which is the largest city in the Peruvian Amazon area, and it's the largest city in the world that is not connected by road to any other city. The only way to get there is by plane or by boat, which is very interesting. So it was in Iquitos, and we were going to go fly over this area the next day to document some illegal deforestation from the air. I was with a local fixer, a guy named Jorge, a really cool guy, and he was also a photographer. So before we went and did our job that morning, we got up really early, and we went to the market in Iquitos, which is an area called... Go ahead.
What is a fixer?
A fixer, that's like a local guy who helps you like arrange stuff. It's like journalism business. Yeah, sorry, using some lingo. Like he's just a guy who knows how to like fix stuff up for you. So
yeah.
So before we went and did our job that day, we got up really early and went down to the market in an area called Belén in Iquitos, which is right on the Amazon. And we got there like before 5 a.m. and it was just amazing to see just the wealth of the jungle pour in this tiny port at 5 a.m. All of this like food and it was all food, fish and fruit and animals and everything just coming in to this town. And every morning this happens. Everyone who lives out in all the different areas around Iquitos bring in the stuff they harvest from the jungle. And it was that point, it's a little bit weird. I was like, oh, I get why they called it Amazon.com. Because it's a market. Like the Amazon jungle is this market. I mean, it's a local market, but it was a pretty bastardized use of the word Amazon, but it's a river that brings everything in. And it was just amazing. All this fruit, I watched guys just bring bananas, huge things of bananas up into town. And it was kind of funny. A few hours later, we were up at one of the other markets that's further away, and you could kind of see the bananas move through the supply chain, even within the town of Iquitos. Like they're coming in at the wholesalers at the market, but by the end of the day, they're at all the little, corner shops and everything. And the price had probably gone up 3 times just within this. It was pretty cool. But we were going around, taking just pictures on our cell phones, just having fun, taking pictures and seeing things. And I kept seeing at a bunch of different stands. I mean, most of the stuff I recognized, there was, just all sorts of fruits I recognized, a lot of them that are kind of, rare to most people, but I had been to Peru before. So there's a fruit called the camu camu, and there's a Brazil nut, and there's, other jungle fruits. But there was one fruit that I kept seeing a lot of in these huge piles of these glossy black. They were glossy black, sometimes a little red, sometimes a little yellow, about the size of a baseball, maybe a little smaller. Mostly round, a little bit oval, mostly round, but they were everywhere. Like everyone had a huge pile of them. And I was like, what is that? And the guy, Jorge was like, I don't know. And so he asked someone and they're like, oh, it's Umarí. And I'm like, oh, what's an Umarí? And they're like, oh yeah, Umarí is it's a fruit. It's like butter. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, you take it and you squeeze it and you put it on your bread. And I'm like, whoa, really? And then I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so this is where the regret comes in. I didn't buy one. So I've never tasted an Umarí.
Oh.
But then later,
that is a twinge of regret.
Yeah, later I got back to some internet. I started researching it, and it's one of these. It's a plant that there's not a ton of information about it online. The Wikipedia page is pretty sparse. There's a few other places where people describe it, but apparently it's very oily. I guess similar to an avocado, but maybe even more so.
Oh,
and the flavor is apparently pretty buttery as well, and you can just spread it onto bread, or you can extract an oil from it. It's a super oily fruit, which is very interesting. And I just happened to be in Iquitos right at the peak of harvest season for Umarí, so it was everywhere. What I learned later was that the area we were going to document, and this is where a bit of maybe sorrow comes in, the area we're going to document is this illegally deforested cacao plantation that is just across the river from Iquitos in a place called Tamxiacu, a town called Tamxiacu. And in 2013, this massive cacao project got started there, and an area half the size of Manhattan was illegally deforested. And so I was filming that from the air. When I got back to the United States and was reading about Umarí, I found this book called Agroforestry: Realities, Possibilities, and Potentials from 1987. And they talk about one of the main areas for Umarí is Tamshiaku. So this area that has been illegally deforested is one of like the main areas where they grow Umarí. And I have a feeling now, and this is something that if I could like was a botanist and wanted to like do a PhD, very interesting to see the effects. I would love to know the effects of this illegal deforestation and this large scale agriculture on this native plant, and whether, just the damaging effects of deforestation on it, but also the market driving local people away from taking care of this plant, because it was a staple plant in their own forestry, their local forestry systems. But now there's this external pressure that's getting them to do cocoa, and how much Umarí is being taken care of and planted anymore. And so that's where maybe the ultimate sorrow is. I don't know the next time I'll be in Iquitos. Who knows? I don't know the next time I'll be there during the peak season of Umarí. But, who knows how long there'll be a wealth of Umarí anyway, if this kind of deforestation of the Amazon is allowed to continue. And it's a plant. It's one of those things. It's this thing that exists that most people have never heard of. I never heard of it. It exists in this little world by itself, and it could be erased because of the greed of humanity. And how many other things out there are like that we just have completely missed. So I'm bummed I didn't get to taste it. It sounds like a really cool fruit. The other thing that's interesting about it is that it's this very oily fruit. One of the things they're also deforesting in that area of Peru, deforesting for in Peru, is palm oil, which is a fruit to make oil. And this is also an oily fruit. And it's almost like, are you just replacing a native oily fruit for another one because because one has a market and one doesn't? I don't know. Anyway, I could rant about that for a while, but I'm bummed I didn't taste an Umarí, but it's something that's stuck in my head for a long time, and hopefully someday I'll get to try one, and hopefully they can continue to thrive.
The title of this song is The Rose. It's a very ancient song, perhaps about 500 years old at least. No beautiful palace have I on the hill, no pictures to hang in my hall, but there is no painter can match with the skill of the roses that bloom on my wall.
My guest on today's episode of Rootbound was Harmony Ellington. Harmony currently writes scary astrology emails to brighten your day. You can sign up for those emails at voyage.earth. Harmony is also my sister. Rootbound is hosted by me, Steve Ellington. Music by Christian Kriegescota. Fake ads by David Lanni. Rootbound is a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside. But every now and then, you should wander outside, look at some plants, and enjoy.
Try the Calvin cycle. Carbon fixation for the rest of us.